Movie begins with a creepy scene where a man commits suicide by drowning in a mucky lake, due to which his body completely disappeared in the water and no trace of the body was found. Then the film's main character Laura is seen, who is professionally a successful and independent woman but very disturbed in her personal life. Laura's boss likes her a lot, but after coming home from work she spends all her time on alcohol and drugs. Not only that, Laura was also suffering from eating disorder. One night, while returning home from work, she saw a woman scolding her baby because the baby was crying. Laura tells the woman and her mother, "It's normal for a baby to cry. Please don't scold her." But both the woman and her mother did not listen to her and instead insulted her and chased her away. Laura became very disturbed by this incident and calls her ex-girlfriend to spend the night with her. But she fights over Laura's addiction to drugs and alcohol, and Laura is left alone again. She takes cocaine and alcohol all night, because of which, while getting ready for office in the morning, she felt dizzy and then she faints. After fainting, a dark black liquid is seen coming towards Laura, which slowly entering into her mouth. Then a hand emerges from the darkness of the room and moves towards Laura. Just then Laura regains her consciousness. After regaining consciousness, Laura leaves her house and walks out into the road, where she finds the woman from the previous night eating her own baby. Seeing this kind of scene, Laura gets very scared, and then she wakes up and realizes that it was actually a nightmare. After that, Laura took the mobile phone and saw many calls from the office, so she quickly left for the office. On reaching office, she heard from her boss that her mom had called to look for her. Hearing this, Laura gets very nervous and suddenly starts bleeding from her nose. But surprisingly, the blood coming out of her nose was exactly the same as the black liquid that was seen entering into Laura's mouth while she was fainted. Max tries to help Laura, but she scolds her and leaves. Returning home, Laura calls her mother. Laura's mother then tells her that she feels Laura is not well. She asks Laura to come back home near her. She also says that it will be good for both of them so that they can correct their old mistakes and move on. It should be noted that Laura left her home and village and moved to the city 20 years ago. Laura's mother mistreated her a lot during her childhood. Even today, Laura could not come out of that trauma. But after talking to her mother, Laura decided to go back to her village. In the next scene, Laura is seen in her village moonlit, where the environment looks very weird and creepy. Laura was not liked by anyone there, and everyone behaved rudely towards her. Laura notices that none of the people in Moonlit have aged much since her departure, as if someone has slowed down the time here. Then Laura is seen walking towards her mother Celia, who is waiting for her at the door. Laura notices that there is no shortage of money in the house. The neighborhood is also very rich and well maintained. Laura also asks her mother about this. Listening to their conversation, it seems that Laura's childhood abuse is very normal for her mother. Since returning home, Celia has repeatedly asked Laura to go for a walk in the garden. She thinks that Laura loved to play in the garden when she was a child, but in reality Laura would go to the garden to hide from her mother. Laura gets fed up with her mother's behavior and decides to leave home again. Leaving the house, Laura sees her childhood friend Abby and is happy to see her. Abby and her father are the only people in the village who aged normally in the past 20 years. Abby says that she lost her mother to cancer, so Laura should spend as much time as she can with her mother. Laura returns home after listening to Abby. Celia was standing at the door waiting for Laura, and when Laura returns, she again creepily insists Laura on taking her to the garden. Laura comes to the room on the pretext of relaxing. Celia then comes to Laura's room with a glass of water and promises to wait for her at dinner. Laura then falls asleep, and Celia strangely keeps an eye on Laura from her front room. After a while, she herself came into Laura's room and kept calling Laura's name, as if she was checking if Laura was really asleep or not. During dinner, Celia apologizes to Laura several times, saying that Laura's father committed suicide and it was very difficult for her to raise Laura alone. So she sometimes used to torture Laura, but she tried her best. Laura gets angry hearing these all and leaves the dinner. The next scene shows Laura gets her period, and her period blood was exactly similar to that black liquid. On the other hand, Celia is also shown to be sick, and the same black liquid is dripping from her nose. Seeing this, she became very worried. Before going to sleep, Laura again drank the water her mother had brought for her and fell into a deep sleep. Celia enters Laura's room in the midnight and ensures that Laura is indeed sleeping. Celia slaps Laura several times and sits on top of her. Then she screamed Laura's name. When Laura doesn't respond, then she drags Laura down the stairs to the garden below. Then she tries to unlock the storeroom so she can take Laura inside. But then Laura starts to regain her senses and Celia runs inside, leaving Laura there. When Laura opens her eyes and she discovers herself in the garden, she became surprised. But she thought she might have been sleepwalking. The next morning, Laura finds Celia making breakfast in the kitchen, and she decides to search her room, where she finds a diary. In this diary, Celia noted her sexual experiences. Laura was very surprised to see that. She realizes that her mother had many boyfriends. She puts everything back in place and leave. The next scene shows Celia mixing sedatives into Laura's food. She willingly feeds Laura jam laced with sedatives. But it is of no use, because Laura vomits every time she eats. After breakfast, Laura wants to go for a morning walk, but Celia insists on taking her to the garden again. However, despite Celia's 1,000 words, she leaves the house. A tree is then shown outside Laura's house with many creepy notes hanging on it, like, "Thanks for my hair, my old body is back." In fact, there was still a man hanging a note that read, "Thanks for my teeth." The man looked like he was in a very bad condition or very ill. A little later, Laura meets Abby's father, who is a village priest. He was requesting the villagers not to participate in the church procession. He tells them that it is very dangerous, and by doing this they are going to sacrifice their own souls. But no one pays attention to his words. Laura also finds Abby on the street, who has actually been keeping an eye on her. When Laura asks Abby about it, Abby tells her that Celia told her to do this because Celia doesn't want her daughter to leave her again. This scene also reveals that Abby and Laura were actually lovers, and Abby rejects Laura because Laura left Abby with her alcoholic father and dying mother. The next scene shows Laura back in her home, where she and Celia confront each other again. Then Laura again insisted on leaving, but Celia says she's going to die. Hearing that, Laura decides to stay. Celia then tells Laura that Laura's father and Celia struggled hard to give birth to Laura. Shortly after Laura's birth, Laura's father committed suicide. Celia also said that it was becoming difficult for her to be alone and take care of Laura all day and night. Then they both go to the lake, which was shown in the beginning of the movie. Laura then tells Celia about her drug overdose, and she thinks that day the hand she saw in the dark was actually her father's who saved her. Celia then tells Laura that there is a place in the garden where they can connect with Laura's father. Saying this, Celia takes Laura to that storeroom in the garden and tells her that it was her father's greenhouse where he spent most of his time. Celia then tells Laura to call her father and points to a dark corner at the end of the greenhouse where Laura might see her father. Then Laura steps into that dark corner and calls her father's spirit. At that moment, Celia came up behind Laura with a tub in her hand that she wanted to hit Laura with. But before she can do that, Laura looks back and says that her father was actually a coward who left his family alone. Laura angrily says this and leaves. Back home, Laura sympathizes with Celia because Celia was victim too. Then she informs Celia about reading her diary in a funny pretense. Hearing this, Celia gets very angry and goes to the kitchen to make tea. She again mixed sedatives with the tea and also scolded Laura a lot. Meanwhile, Celia's condition suddenly began to worsen. Again, that black liquid and some strange worms started coming out of her mouth and her body began to deteriorate. Seeing this, Laura feels ashamed of her actions and apologizes to Celia. But Celia asks Laura to get away from her. Laura then goes to meet Abby. This scene reveals that Abby's father is angry with God since Abby's mother died. Then it is also revealed that Abby was also diagnosed with cancer a few years ago, but is thankfully cured. After talking for a while, Laura and Abby start to get closer, and then suddenly a black wound appears on Laura's hand, which scares her a lot. Then Celia is shown. She was then trying to fix her look with makeup. After a while, there comes the man who was hanging note on the tree. He came to call Celia for the church service, but Celia refuses him, saying that her daughter has come home unexpectedly, so she have to reschedule everything. But the man insists on taking Celia to the church and says that this rule has been followed for years. She helps the villagers and they give her everything in return. Now all the rules can't be changed suddenly. After the man's constant insistence, Celia agrees to go with him. At that time, Laura came back home running because the wound on her hand was getting worse. In fact, she could see worms moving under her skin. Celia doesn't care about this. She tells Laura to stay home and reassures her that everything will be fine. Celia even appoints a man outside the house to watch over Laura until Celia returns home. But Laura knocks the man unconscious and reaches the church in search of her mother. An old creepy music was playing inside the church. To find out the truth, Laura tries to see what is going on inside the church from the window, and the scene inside completely shocks her. Laura saw that a demon figure was being worshipped inside the church instead of God. Celia was standing in front of everyone and all the villagers were naked there. After a while, a kind of black liquid started to flow from Celia's chest, which everyone went crazy to eat. Seeing this, Laura's condition worsened more, and from her nose, mouth, and even from her eyes that liquid started to come out. On the other hand, Abby's cancer has also returned. Laura helplessly rushes to Abby's house and meets Abby's father Can, the church priest. Laura learns all the truth about the village ritual from Kansas. Can says Laura's father was a magician and he knew many ancient rituals. He gives himself to a demon to give Celia the happiness of a child. This is how Laura was born. She is actually a demon's child. Later, Celia fell into greed and stole the demon's power. She cunningly involved the villagers into this as well, causing all of their lives to be ruined. Celia actually enslaved all the souls of the villagers to that demon. Abby and his father were the only ones in the village who did not surrender themselves to that demon entity. Laura gets very upset after hearing these. Ken tells her that Laura has no other way to escape now. Only mercy can be shown for her so that she can die in peace. He then advises Laura to get out of there. Then Laura starts looking for Celia again, and a man takes her to the greenhouse saying that Celia is there. After going to the greenhouse, the man tells Laura that Celia told me what to do with you. Then the man tries to push Laura towards the dark corner where Celia also wanted to throw Laura. Then for the first time the black area was shown in the movie, which was actually a pool with the black liquid inside. The man tries to throw Laura into the pool, but he himself falls into the pool. As the man falls into the pool, a female demon emerges from the black water, which was very scary to see. The demon took the form of a giant motherly figure with many worms coming out of its mouth. The demon takes the man in her arms and kills him. Seeing this scene, Laura runs out of the greenhouse in fear. But before Laura can get far, Abby catches her and takes her to Celia. She also reveals that her cancer has returned and only Celia can save her. Celia then reveals that Laura is not actually her, but the demon's daughter. Then she says that everything was going well, but Laura was about to die during the day of her drug overdose. That night, the demon takes pity on Laura and saves her. But saving Laura left the demon powerless, and also the villagers became helpless. That's why Celia makes an excuse to bring Laura to the village, so she can give Laura to the demon and everything goes back to normal. That time Ken also arrives there and gets to know that his daughter Abby has been working for Celia for a long time. Abby says that last time her cancer was cured by Celia, not by God. Then Celia and Abby push Laura towards the pool, but surprisingly the demon mother doesn't do anything to Laura because Laura is her child. Damon lets Laura leave from there, while Abby's father commits suicide after hearing his daughter's confession. After leaving the greenhouse, Laura takes Celia at gunpoint and demands to release that demon. Celia says releasing the demon will kill everyone in the village. Laura still cuts off the black water supply and the demonic figure emerges from the black well and disappears. Then Laura takes Celia to the church where the villagers are already dying. There, Laura tells the villagers the whole truth, that the matriarch of the village is not Celia but the demon whom Celia has been holding captive for so long. But the villagers ignore Laura's words and ask Celia for help. Celia starts laughing and says Laura and her real mother ruined everything. None of this would have happened if Laura had died of drug overdose. Hearing this, Laura kills Celia and leaves from the church. In the end scene, Laura is seen in front of that dark lake and she drowns herself in the lake like her father. That was the story of the movie. In this movie, Celia's husband actually practiced black magic and had a lot of knowledge about black magic. He and Celia could never be parents. So, through a sacrificial ritual, he summons a six-breasted matriarch demon to the earth who gives birth to Laura. The demon then gave Laura to Celia and gave her some powers because Celia was Laura's earthly mother. But here Celia was a greedy woman. After gaining the matriarch's power, she began to distribute the black liquid oozes from her body to the villagers, through which they gain youth, health, and in return Celia gains matriarch's position, prestige, and wealth. Celia had physical relations with many villagers, and in return she gained more power. But she didn't like Laura at all because Laura was not her daughter and she never wanted shared motherhood. All was going well for 20 years after Laura left the village, but when the demon spent all her power to save Laura's life, she had nothing left to give Celia. So Celia asks Laura to come back so she can get her power back by sacrificing Laura. That's why Celia continuously gave Laura sedatives, sometimes mixed with food, sometimes mixed with water, so that she can throw Laura into that dark well in the greenhouse. But at the end of the movie, the matriarch lets her daughter go and Laura also frees her real mother from that dark well. If you enjoy our video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.